This is Democracy Watch. So, Mark, there has been a back and forth between Democrats like Dick Durbin and Sheldon Whitehouse and Supreme Court Justice Samuel Alito in the wake of this flag controversy. Alito refused to recuse himself from any election cases related to the 2020 election. John Roberts refused to meet with Durbin and Whitehouse about the Supreme Court's ethics. First of all, most importantly here, what could Democrats do to compel some action here? Is a subpoena, for example, possible?
Yeah, I wasn't entirely surprised with Alito's response. I mean, there were aspects of the details that were a little surprising, but I was surprised that the chief refused the meeting because you wouldn't expect that a coordinate branch of government, when it requests a meeting, would be denied. I mean, if the president asked for a meeting with if Joe Biden asked for a meeting with the Speaker of the House, who's a Republican and obviously politically quite opposite, they're going to have the meeting. Nothing may come of it. So I was a little surprised that the Chief Justice, as the Chief Justice, in other words, speaking on behalf of the Supreme Court, wouldn't agree to a meeting. So that surprised me. Obviously, this can always escalate. You have situations in which Congress issues subpoenas to the White House or the executive branch. You have instances sometimes when it goes in the opposite direction. And normally we try to avoid those things in our system of government because they are co-equal branches of government. But obviously Congress does have an oversight role over the executive branch and over the courts in some areas. And of course, let's not forget, Congress also has impeachment power. And justices of the Supreme Court can be impeached. And I'm not suggesting that it should go there or that it's going to go there, but that's why I'm just very surprised that there is not more comedy being shown by the court in at least a discussion phase of this.
Well, to your point, you mentioned that they have a role in oversight, but what about an obligation to oversight? I mean, to what extent should Congress or the Senate more specifically be compelling some type of action, to meet with either John Roberts or Samuel Alito or to do something here? Yeah,
look, I think that we have as a society not struck the right balance about the judiciary, back to sort of Schoolhouse Rocks, right? There are three branches of government, and we have come to expect that when there are things that are either on the line, close to the line, or certainly over the line in the executive branch, we expect that there is going to be oversight. Like, it's not a question of whether there could be, there should be. And we expect that when there are issues in Congress, that the Justice Department, that other executive branch agencies will likewise do so, as well as Congress doing it. And I think we have sort of viewed the Supreme Court and the courts in kind of a different place because they've occupied a different place in society. But honestly, Brian, I think that's kind of changed. I mean, at the point that the court is, you have justices who are flying flags upside down or otherwise, have them or their family members involved in, direct political activity. There needs to be more of an expectation that Congress is going to police that line. And that it's not going to be hands off. And by the way, there's a role here for the media too. The media covers members of Congress and members of the executive branch with a deep-seated skepticism. And that skepticism doesn't always apply to the way in which they cover the court.
So you mentioned before impeachment. I know there are folks out there who are going to say impeachment isn't even possible with the composition of this Congress, so why bother trying? But the January 6th committee, for example, was hugely consequential. So why not at least get this controversy out there front and center so that we have, a full knowledge of the breadth of what happened?
Look, I think this is the mistake that is oftentimes made, is that people look to the end of the process as a reason not to begin it. We will never get it passed through the Senate, so therefore we won't bring it, or Speaker Johnson won't schedule a floor vote, or the committee will never convene, whatever, right? Like, there's always a reason why in the end it may fail. But there are two answers to that. The first is you don't know until you try. People thought we wouldn't get Ukraine aid. Remember, like, we'll never get Ukraine aid because the House Republicans will never bring it to the floor. And the Speaker will never bring it to the floor. And in the end, there was Ukraine aid because the politics of these things tends to be more dynamic than, frankly, people give it credit. Everyone assumes that everything in Washington, D.C. is very static. And in fact, it's not that way. The politics of things shift, and you can't take advantage of those shifts if you don't in some ways create them. That's number one. But the second is, even if it's not going to lead to impeachment or, and even if you don't even think it should lead to impeachment, there is a value in Congress doing oversight for the sake of doing oversight, like just literally for the sake of getting the truth out. And so not everything needs to be, well, if we can't get a dire consequence, we shouldn't do anything. Congress does a lot of oversight that is not ultimately going to lead to transformative legislation or impeachment, but yet it brings public scrutiny. It brings an air of transparency to something that is not transparent. And the courts are particularly non-transparent.
And by the way, that's something that actually could backfire on Congress because, for example, when Republicans brought this whole Hunter Biden, Joe Biden impeachment inquiry effort forward, it did exactly that. It brought transparency to the process, proved to the American people that there was no there, that they had no evidence to back up what they were actually doing, and it became a laughingstock. But that's only because they tried to do it, and it lasted long enough that the American people started to recognize, to the dismay of these Republicans, that they actually didn't have any evidence to back up what they were saying, and it kind of had the effect of absolving Joe Biden for not doing what the Republicans said he did.
No, that's exactly right. I mean, in some ways, again, why I'm surprised that the Chief Justice, back to the first question, like why I'm surprised that this meeting didn't take place is that actually it would be an opportunity for the Supreme Court to actually clear the air and perhaps wind up the better for it, right? It's like sometimes oversight works really well for the person being subject to oversight. Like oversight doesn't always have to work out badly for them, as you point out. The other thing about the Hunter Biden laptop situation and the impeachment that is a good example of what I said is that the politics shifts. We started this Congress with the Republicans saying we are definitely going to impeach Joe Biden. And by the time they got to the end of it and were made a laughingstock, the politics within the Republican Party had shifted. That you had Republican members of the House saying, look, I got to run for re-election. I can't be part of this crazy clown car. Right. Yeah. So the politics of that impeachment didn't go forward, not just because there was no evidence, but because it wound up being a political liability for Republicans in vulnerable seats to be associated with. And so that's what I mean. Like the politics of this stuff is not always set in stone.
Yeah. Just a quick reminder for those watching right now, this topic was covered extensively in Democracy Docket, which is the free news outlet Marc founded to focus on everything voting and elections. If you are not signed up for Democracy Docket, do yourself a favor and sign up. It's the most useful resource I have for the courts right now. I'll put the link right here on the screen and also in the post description of this video. Marc, what would happen to any other judge, for example? I'm not talking about a Supreme Court justice, just a judge in our judiciary system, not on the Supreme Court, if they did what Samuel Alito did?
Look, I think there would be an investigation. Now, again, what the outcome of that investigation would be is hard to say because we've gotten actually a number of conflicting sort of or iterative versions of this story. I mean, the latest one in his letter was that essentially he saw the upside down flag, he objected to the upside down flag, and then he apparently consulted Virginia property law and realized that because she was a co-owner of the house, he was powerless to do anything about the upside down flag.
Well, you see, I don't want you to skimp over the fact that Samuel Alito feels very strongly about a woman's right to her own autonomy, and so he felt that there was no place for him to push back on what Martha Ann was doing.
Yeah, on the flag, right? Like they are in
sure, right? Yes. Only on the flag, apparently.
This is not your typical opposites attract marriage. This is like opposites attract on that she likes flags and he doesn't like flags.
Yes.
By the way, do you think if we sent him a flag, I thought about this, like, should we send a flag? Like, because apparently she flies all kinds of flags. I bet you and I could come up with a flag that
we could come up with something. She apparently has very little discretion in terms of what she's willing to fly. So I think we could probably come up with something. Maybe we have like a woman's right to autonomy flag and see.
Well, I was thinking a democracy docket flag. Yeah, like, do you think if we sent like a democracy is on the docket flag, they would fly it? Because I mean, like, what's better for a Supreme Court justice than democracy being on the docket?
apparently the appeal to heaven flag. That's apparently in 2024 what qualifies.
Yeah.
Okay, so to that point then, what should we have, in your opinion, in the way of some code of conduct or changes for the Supreme Court as it stands right now?
Yeah, so this red herring has developed, and I don't know where it started, but there is some, like, now commonly held and argued view that somehow Supreme Court justices can't be held to a code of conduct because it would violate the Constitution. That is insane. Like, members of Congress are elected pursuant to the U.S. Constitution, and there is a code of conduct that governs members of Congress. Like, the cabinet is appointed pursuant to the U.S. Constitution. There is a code of conduct that applies to members of the cabinet. So there is no reason why the Supreme Court should be exempt from a code of conduct.
Mark, Samuel Alito is 74 years old. Clarence Thomas is 75. Talk about the implications in this upcoming election for the future of the Supreme Court, given the age of these justices.
You could argue that what Leonard Leo taught us was that the most important thing in choosing a president is the power to nominate and confirm judges and justices on the Supreme Court. That fundamentally, Leonard Leo was willing to sell out everything else that the conservative movement might believe simply to get Donald Trump in office so that he would appoint justices on the Supreme Court. Now, I think that presidents do a lot more than that, and it is not just that. But I do think there is a greater awareness today that the next president of the United States is likely to put a stamp on the Supreme Court for a generation. We have a 6-3 court right now, and let me tell you something. Someone who argued before the Supreme Court 4 times before conservative Supreme Courts, there is a big difference between a 5-4 conservative court and a 6-3 conservative Supreme Court. And there is certainly a big difference between a 6-3 conservative court and a 5-4 majority liberal court. And so, it is likely the next president will nominate at least 1, maybe 2 Supreme Court justices. It is also the case, and this is really important for people to hear, Joe Biden has proved himself to be an extraordinary figure when it comes to nominating judges and justices. Like, he is choosing people who are exceptionally qualified and are also from very, very different backgrounds than the traditional corporatist former prosecutors who get put on courts. Donald Trump has, I have to say begrudgingly, proved himself an extraordinary person when it comes to putting people on the court, in that he puts complete ideologues on. Yeah. And so the difference between those 2 candidates is frankly broader than any 2 candidates we have seen, at least in my lifetime. I mean, the travel distance between what a Trump justice and a Biden justice would look like in 2025, 26, 27, 28 is just dramatically different. So Here's my message. If you care about justice in America, you need to support Joe Biden for president. If you care about individual rights and liberties, you need to eagerly and enthusiastically make sure that your friends are registered to vote and that they vote for Joe Biden, Kamala Harris, and the Democratic team. Whatever else may be on your mind, whatever other issues may be of concern to you, the Supreme Court's going to be around for a generation, and they are going to decide climate policy. They are going to decide cases involving individual freedom, reproductive rights, voting rights, democracy, the role of the ability of government to help people or harm people. And I plead to you, as someone who has spent their life focused on getting justice for Americans in court, please support Joe Biden and the Democrats.
Couldn't have said it better myself. We'll leave it there. Again, for those watching right now, to support the work that Mark and his team are doing, sign up for Democracy Docket. I'll put the link right here on the screen and also in the post description of this video. I'm Brian Tyler Cohen.
I'm Marc Elias.
This is Democracy Watch.